Hi there, it's Jennifer McGuire. I don't know about you, but right now I'm collecting a lot of holiday stamps and dies. However, I want to find ways to stretch those holiday stamps and dies for non-holiday occasions so I can use them all year round. Here I'll be taking some holiday stamps and dies that you see on the card on the right to create some non-holiday cards like the one on the left here and the blue card that you see here. So we're going to do a few examples today and also share some fun techniques along the way. All of the products that I'm using today are from the Essentials by Ellen line from Ellen Hudson, and they're designed by Julie Ebersol, and I just love this line. Now I am taking one of the die sets here. This is one of the new die sets, and I'm using my wire clippers to cut apart the dies. So dies often come connected. That's part of the manufacturing process. So you just need to use wire snips to cut them apart. So I'm taking out some of the basic leaf images from the first die set, and from the second die set, I'm just taking out the one leaf image. But you can see there are lots here that would work great for the technique that we're using today. Now you could use these dies to create a bunch of die cuts and adhere them to the background, but I'm actually going to use these dies to create my own stamps. So I have a piece of craft foam here. It's also known as fun foam. You can see there's a little bit of dimension to it. This is the stuff we played with a lot as a kid, and it's great for creating your own stamps. And the nice thing about it is that it die cuts beautifully. So I am putting these dies that I've picked out here face down onto the white craft foam, and I'm going to run it through my die cut machine just like I would regular cardstock. Now it'll flatten a bit as it goes through the machine, of course, but once you have it out for a few minutes, it pops back up. And check these out, you end up with some great dimensional die cuts. Now you could adhere these to your card and have some fun with that, but instead I'm going to use them to do stamping on my card. To turn the foam die cuts into a stamp, you just need to temporarily adhere them to an acrylic block. I just use a tiny bit of my stamp runner and put it right onto the back of the foam die cut, and I put that on the acrylic block. And you can always clean away the adhesive. I use an alcohol swab later on. Now this die cut here was actually a stem for a flower, so I'm going to cut part of the stem away and just keep the three leaves that are connected. Now you'll notice I'm putting foam die cuts on both sides of the acrylic block, so all I have to do is flip it over to use the other shape. So once I have mounted all of my newly formed stamps, it's time to create the card. Let's start with the one on the left, and you can see the sentiment that says, "You are wonderful." I created that out of two stamp sets. So the stamp set on the left is new from Julie Ebersol, and I love that sentiment that said, "It's the most wonderful time of the year." But I wanted to use it for a non-holiday card, so I'm just cutting out the word wonderful. You can easily cut apart your sentiment stamps by cutting the stamp right between the words. Now don't worry, the stamps do not scream. It's okay. You can always mount them how they were originally intended, and this is a great way to get more out of your stamps. So I'm just carefully cutting out the word wonderful. I think that's a beautiful word there. And then I found this other stamp set on the right that says, "You are my person." And this one's also from Julie. She released this one a while ago. And I'm going to cut apart this sentiment so I have the words "you are." So now I can put the "you are" with the word wonderful and have a completely different sentiment. Carefully chopping up your sentiments is a great way to give them a lot of life. You can form new sentiments by combining different stamp sets. And here I took a holiday stamp set and made it completely different. So now I can stamp that "You are wonderful" sentiment towards the bottom of a 4 1/4 by 5 1/2 inch piece of white cardstock with Versamark ink, and then I'm adding some Wow gold glitter embossing powder. I really love gold and silver glitter embossing powders because it's a great way to add some interest to a card very quickly. So now it's time to do that fun green monochromatic stamping on the top with our foam stamps. And I wanted multiple shades of the same color of green. So I grabbed my Altenew inks. Altenew inks are great because they come in collections of 4 in one color. There's like a super light, a medium, and a dark, and all of the same color. Well, for this example today, I'm just going to use 2 of the greens, a medium and a light green, so I can show you how you can get more out of just 2 ink pads. Okay, so I'm inking up the first one. This is the medium green color. I'm inking up my foam stamp and stamping it right onto the paper. Now, when you ink it up, you need to ink it a little bit more than you do a clear stamp, just to make sure that ink really transfers onto the foam stamp. And then when you stamp it onto your paper, you don't want to press too hard. You just press lightly. Now you'll notice on these 2 green leaves, I'm double stamping it. That's because I wanted it to be extra dark. So one of the ways to create a darker color is to double stamp it. Okay, so now I'm going to grab the next one here, and this time I'm just going to ink it up with that same ink, but only stamp it one time. So I'm ending up with what that true color is intended to be. So now I'm going to move on to the light green, and sometimes I'll just stamp this one time, sometimes I'll double stamp it to make it a little bit darker. But what I am doing here is I want these images to be more concentrated towards the top of the card and then kind of lighten up and space out a little bit towards the bottom of the card where the sentiment is. I also want the images to be darker towards the top of the card and kind of lighten up towards the bottom so that it doesn't distract from that sentiment. So you'll see I'm stamping these close together and I'm overlapping them a lot towards the top. And by the way, I did mention that I adhered a foam stamp to both sides of the acrylic block. That's because I had a bunch of images and I only had a few acrylic blocks. It just makes it faster too. You just flip the stamp over and you're ready to go with your next image. Now I said that I wanted to have smaller images and spaced out images towards the sentiment. I didn't have many small ones, so I'm taking the stem image that had the 3 leaves connected and I'm cutting those leaves off and I'm going to use those leaves individually so I can have some smaller ones to fill in spaces and also to scatter spaced out towards the bottom of the card. So also look at your die cuts. A lot of times you can give them haircuts and cut them up into smaller images and get even more do-it-yourself stamps from them. As I mentioned, I used Altenew ink today because they come in great color collections. However, you can use any other dye ink. You can also use pigment inks for this. So I tried the stamping with foam, the craft foam out with a lot of different inks, and I had success with most of them. So I encourage you to try whatever inks you may have. Now at this point, I'm just going up and darkening some of those images towards the top, so we have that variation from darker to lighter going down the card. After I stamped all of my leaves, I went ahead and added tiny little white dots to each of the leaves just to add just a bit of detail, a bit of interest. I'll admit I first did these dots with a gold gel pen and I found it was a little distracting from the sentiment. It distracted away from the sentiment. So I decided just to use the white dots instead, and it really makes a big difference. Another fun idea here would be to add some shading with some colored pencils, like add a little bit of darker green to the lighter green leaves just to add a little bit of shading, or you can add some highlighting with a white colored pencil. Okay, before we assemble that card, let's go ahead and do the stamping on our other cards. So we've already taken those holiday dies and used them to create non-holiday stamps. But while we're here, let's go ahead and create a quick holiday card also. And I'm going to do that with the holly dies to create those stamps. So here are the craft foam die cuts that I created from the holly and the berry dies. I'm going to go ahead and cut the berries off the stem. So I have 3 little berries, and I'm going to temporarily adhere these to my acrylic block. Whenever I want my stamping to be around my sentiment, I always start with the sentiment first. So this is that holiday sentiment that says it's the most wonderful time of the year. I'm stamping that with Versamark in the center of this white cardstock and adding the gold glitter embossing powder. So this is the sentiment that I cut up earlier, and I cut the word wonderful out, but I went ahead and put it together like a puzzle piece on my acrylic block and put it back together how it was intended. Works beautifully. So I'm going to do some stamping with the foam die cuts that I created. I'm speeding it up just to save a little bit of time here. This time I'm using the darkest of the Altenew green inks for one of the holly images, and then I'm going to move on to the medium shade. Now notice when I move from one color to another, I just kind of rub the ink off on my scrap paper. It seems to work great. I don't like to add baby wipe to or any kind of moisture to that foam stamp because it kind of absorbs it. So you want to keep it dry. So I just rub the ink off of it when I move on to another color. And now I'm using one of the Altenew red inks to add berries to it also. Very simple stamping here. It's a great way to take those dies that you have and turn them into stamps. And once again, to add a little detail, I added some tiny little dots with my white gel pen. You know me, while I have all of my stuff out, I might as well make another card, and I wanted to do one with some of the other dies that Julia Barsal has released in the past, this time some of her floral dies. This time I'm also using some of the Altenew inks. I'm using the dark, medium, and light shade from the blue collection. And these inks are just absolutely beautiful. I love these colors. This is one of the newer collections that they've added. They've recently added a few, including blue and purple. So I decided to put the blue to use here. Again, I'm doing most of the darker stamping towards the top where I'm concentrating all the images really close together. And then I'm scattering them farther apart and using lighter colors the farther down the card I go. At this point, I realized I didn't have many small little flower die cuts available, so what I did is I took that little berry that we used for the red berries on the card, I flipped that little foam die cut over, glued it onto my block, and I used it to create little blue berries also, and it worked perfectly. So this card came together very quickly, and by the way, I used a silver glitter embossing powder on this card instead of the gold that I used on the others. Okay, now that we've finished all of our stamping, it's time to put our cards together. These were 4¼ by 5½ inch white cardstock pieces that I started with. On the holiday card, I trimmed about 1/4 inch off the top and the bottom. And on the other two cards, I trimmed off about a little less than 1/4 inch off both sides. This way, we can allow some of our note card to peek through on the sides of the cards. Now, I decided to make the note cards match the glitter embossed sentiment that we have on the cards. Now, the way to do this is to take a white note card and then rub Versamark along the edges where the card is going to peek through. So on the holiday card, I put Versamark ink on the top and the bottom, and now I'm adding the gold embossing powder to those edges, and I'm going to heat set this. This will make it look like our entire note card is gold glitter embossed like the sentiment, but really we're only embossing the parts that show through. So now I can take that stamp panel, put it right on top, and that gold glitter piece peeks from the top and the bottom. Now, to add a little dimension, I've got another piece of that same white craft foam that I used to create my foam stamps, and I'm trimming it to be slightly smaller than the stamped panel, putting some adhesive on the back of our stamp panel and putting that craft foam on it. This will give it some raised dimension. Now, another type of adhesive that works well with the craft foam is double-sided tape. So I thought I'd show you that option here too. You could use whichever adhesive you may have, double-sided tape or a dry adhesive. And then you can glue it right onto the card, and you've got a little bit of dimension, and you have that gold peeking out the top and the bottom. Now on the other two cards, I did the embossing on the sides of the card so that it would peek through the sides. So here are the three cards. We have our holiday card on the right, and then we have our non-holiday cards that we created using holiday stamps and dies on the left. Creating your own foam stamps from dies is a great way to get more life out of your dies, especially using those holiday products for non-holiday occasions. I hope that this inspires you to try the same. If you're interested in the products, I link below in my YouTube description, and you can head over to my blog for a fun blog hop and a giveaway. Thanks so much for watching. I hope you have a great day.